Next stop, exemplary use of neon and strobe effects. A light here for saucy seaside humour at the end of Pier Show. Next stop for the sun-kissed Mediterranean-style Irish Sea. If, like me, you're a bit of an enthusiast for the way things were, then Blackpool's the place to come to see that they can still be. Well, with a few modifications, of course. Now, I love to come here to get back to a bit of that saucy seaside world that secretly we all love, and for the things that I think I remember from my boyhood. Tickets, please, ladies and gentlemen.
I came here as a lad in love with all things mechanical. I certainly remember being enraptured by what was then a unique local transport system. The rest of the country had got rid of their trams, but the lucky people of Blackpool still had them. Graham Twidell drives trams and writes books about them.
So is this like really driving more like driving a bus or a train?
It's probably something like driving an electric train, London Underground, etc. Something quite similar, I would think.
So why did Blackpool keep on with the trams originally when the other cities gave them up in the first time round?
I think probably because of their attraction. They've always been an attraction, even when trams were going out of fashion in the 50s. By 62, Glasgow had finished, and that was it, apart from the Isle of Man. So we've always kept them because of the importance of them in summer, carrying millions of people on the promenade.
Now, what happens if one of those Americans or Japanese or even an idiot like me walks across the track here? I mean, can you stop on a sixpence?
If anybody walks in front of you, then you have to stop suddenly.
Yeah?
That's what you do.
All right, but if it still takes a few feet, doesn't it?
It takes a few feet. You can't stop dead. It's impossible.
Well, they'd be dead if you...
Well, exactly.
Before the Second World War, many a British city was crisscrossed by tram tracks, the terror of generations of cyclists whose sleep was filled with nightmares about getting wheels jammed in them. This was in a time before town planners decided we needed something more modern, more adaptable, and of course, a lot less magnificent than the tram. Mr. and Mrs. Murgatroyd provide bed and extraordinary breakfast to the thousands who flock here all year round. Mine host, Brian Murgatroyd, is Blackpool born and fried bread. He can't remember a time he didn't ride the trams. Brian, what's your earliest memories of travelling by tram in Blackpool?
I remember my mum taking me up to school. It was about 100 yards up to the tram track. And she put me on the tram and I had to get off the other end myself. I was 5. All the school children were given a book of tickets on a Monday. We got a book of tickets. I think they were a shilling for the week. One of the super things was to get blank cartridges and put them on the track. They were super. I just remembered that.
What? Blank? What do you mean?
You put blank starting pistol cartridges along the track.
So the tram would go...
Bang, bang, bang. So the driver would stop then and jump out to find out what he'd done, and we'd all have a good laugh and run off.
Yeah, lots of people think the Blackpool trams, it's just the bit along the Golden Mile, but they go quite a bit further than that, don't they?
Yes, they go all the way up to Fleetwood, right down almost to the boundary with St Towns.
And tell me about Fleetwood.
If you want a really good tram ride, go to Fleetwood, stay on the tram, it goes right round the town and comes out again. Goes right down the main street. The other thing Fleetwood's got, of course, is 2 lighthouses, but one's right inland, so that when the ships came down the estuary, when you'd lined up both lighthouses, you could turn into the port. The Victorians weren't so stupid, were they, really?
Before mighty Blackpool got going in the middle of the 19th century, Fleetwood was a thriving fishing port. Then it became an important railway destination.
It still has something of a refined air about it, an echo of how this used to be when this was the last stop on the grand railway journey north from Euston. Decimus Burton, the great London architect, laid the town out in a grand classical plan in the 1830s, and this is his greatest monument.
The North Euston Hotel was built to accommodate travellers on the railway line from London's Euston Station, hence the name, bound for Scotland. Fleetwood was as far as they could get by the newfangled railway. From here, they had to catch a boat or get a carriage. But sadly it all went awry, and the grand people that used to come to this magnificent ballroom were only ever here for a few years. It was the railways themselves that did for Fleetwood. They built a new line across Shapfell, down to Carlisle, onto Glasgow, and so took all the passenger traffic away. Those people, that energy, all that business left Fleetwood and went south to Blackpool. Fleetwood is now home to commuters who work in Blackpool and beyond, and today they have a special treat, a vintage tram on the service. Tram number 40 was built in 1916. It would have carried young men off to the First World War. It's a delicious steel, wood and glass confection, a bit like a stately garden shed on rails. You claim, which I don't believe, to be over 80.
I'm 84.
This tram's 91 years old. It is even older than you. So your mum and dad could have travelled on this tram, couldn't
Oh
they?
yeah, I think when my dad used to go to work, it was a penny, an old penny, went to go where he was going to work.
So what does it feel like being in a tram built in the First World War?
Feels like going back in time,
Yeah?
to be quite honest with you.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it's great.
When it came around the corner this morning, I thought, God, that's that, because normally you only ever see it on the special days out. So it's quite fun seeing it come round the corner this morning.
What's it like?
Wet, it's dripping everywhere.
If I said to you that all these would disappear and be replaced by buses, what would you think?
I think it'd be a bad idea.
Because
Because if you take the trams out of Blackpool, you're kidding Blackpool.
so the tram is Blackpool, is it?
Well, yeah, it's like getting rid of the tower, isn't it?
There were no much on the seats. They were like long seats, all wood long seats, one on either side.
Yeah, but this is the posh tram. This is the twopenny tram.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. So who were you anyway?
Part bus, part railway carriage, part airship gondola. These old dears were the first electric public transport, the great-grandparents of the modern trams, now reappearing all over Britain. It takes a lover to gossip these antiques, and that's what Brian Lindop is. He was drawn to Blackpool by the prospect of caring for the tram company's fleet of ancient vehicles. The designers of yesteryear put all the latest fads and fancies, fins and sweeping lines into their creations. I met Brian on the poop deck of what appeared to be a boat.
It's actually known as an open boat car, that's its fleet name. And these were supplied in 1934 originally as a fleet of 10. We now have 5 of them remaining, and out of the 1930s fleet, which still provide the backbone of our everyday operations.
You know, in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, all the original generation of tramways in Britain went, didn't they? Except Blackpool. So why did Blackpool keep its trams?
The tramway has principally survived because it's got its unique right-of-way along the promenade. It doesn't infringe on the road network, and so consequently, when, especially during the illuminations, the traffic comes to a grinding halt and you'll have people trying to drive 4 miles in 3 hours, the tram just saunters happily by and leaves them all behind. Because of this unique feature and its own unique right-of-way, that made it economically viable in order to retain them.
Trams seem to attract people who also love beautiful steam locomotives and lovely railways. Why is that?
It's very true. I think there's a great romanticism about anything that runs on rails. I think people see a tram as something from the past. They don't see it as something of the future or of the present time, and so it becomes a novelty, and I think people look back at them with great longing, a yearning to actually ride on something that perhaps their parents rode on.
The tram is central to the Blackpool story. In the 1890s, the boom was in full swing, and 3 million visitors were flooding in every year. But expansion was being limited by the number of hotel beds available. The tram network meant new accommodation away from the town centre was still linked to the action. Today, Blackpool is still besieged by fun-seekers who need somewhere to rest their heads. Good news for Brian Murgatroyd and the army of B&B owners. Their doors are open to everyone, even politicians. You get party political conferences.
As well. I think they love it, really.
They
The
love
Conservatives like it. I think we're a bit too working class for the Labour, for New Labour.
So Blackpool became the working class
It's a working class resort, you know, and it's not going to be middle class resort. You know, it's just a lot of fun. It was the place to come for the mill owners. And then when the railways came, the mill workers came, so I guess the mill owners didn't.
No matter what their social background, the Victorians were in awe of science and technology, and Blackpool was a showcase for it. No surprise that the tower was built here. Blackpool's piers were marvels of engineering. The North Pier was the first man-made attraction built in the town. It was designed by the gloriously named Eugenius Birch and opened in 1863.
The three Blackpool piers are good examples of Victorian cockiness. Cast iron peninsulas where ladies and gents came in all their fineries to promenade, thumbing their noses at the sea, crashing all around them, and enjoying all manner of saucy offshore entertainments, amusements, delights, rides and reviews.
The illuminations were the icing on the cake for a town that had always made a show of combining science, technology and engineering with entertainment and, of course, business. When they were first introduced in 1912, they extended the holiday season into the autumn.
As the Edwardian afternoon got dark, there'd be a hush of expectation along the front, a last chance to indulge in a delicious meal of cockles and whelks. Before the darkness descended, the show began at the flick of a switch. It's just as good as it ever has been. Every year the lighting designers try and come up with something new. Something for the kiddies, something for the mums and dads. There's cartoon figures, there's fantasy scenes and comedy tableau. And today there's even a shootout in flying saucers piloted by zebras and penguins.
This is what the Victorians, Edwardians, New Georgians and we Elizabethans love. A bit of a show, a vault or two to remind us of great British enterprise and showmanship. But now Blackpool has to contend with competition from alluring foreign destinations and the low-cost airlines that can take us there. These look like being the answer, the type of international casinos that might put a 21st century gloss on a traditional Blackpool thrill.
White 64, yellow 34, blue 43.
The Great British Flutter, a seaside tradition that will never die.
60, blue 55, red number 7, blue 56, red 80.
Stay with us for the news at noon. That's coming up next.